My bike has a 2019 Rockshox Lyrik RC2 fork with 170mm of travel. I've had it 1 year and I've never serviced it. The manual calls for a service every 50 hours, and numerous videos all over the internet say that this is a fairly straightforward, easy thing to do. This fork costs almost £1,000 new, and I'm worried if I don't do something soon, I'm going to do irreparable damage, so I bit the bullet. There are lots of videos showing how to do this, but I used the one from Rockshox YouTube channel. I'll put a link in the description. So I got the bike up on my stand, removed the wheel and removed the brakes. I took care to keep all the nuts and bolts in a separate container and moved the brake calipers out of the way. The next step was to take a reading of the amount of air pressure in the fork, make a note of that, and then take all the air out of the fork. My Rockshox suspension pump has a bleed valve, which is perfect for this job. From here on in, things are going to get messy, so put on some gloves. I started by recording the number of clicks on the rebound damper and turning it all the way to the left, counterclockwise. Loosening off the nuts at the bottom of each leg is the next step. These nuts are on pretty tight. This is the rebound damper. This next step is the one that made me really nervous. I bought a special rubber mallet for it, and you've got to thump the living daylights out of these things because they are in pretty stiff. The rebound damper gave me the most trouble. I had to give that lots of persuasion before it finally came loose. Once the lower leg was off, I could see that even though it was filthy on the outside, it was clean inside. The seals had done their job. I'd used isopropyl alcohol, which you can get on Amazon, and that cleans off any oily bits. The next step is to remove the foam wiper and clean it. I'd bought a set of picks from Amazon for this job. There's a foam wiper in each of the legs and they were filthy. I soaked them in a bowl with isopropyl alcohol, and after scrubbing them several times they actually cleaned up not too bad, so I could reuse them. Remember, dispose of your used alcohol responsibly. I dried the foam wipers using kitchen towel and then soaked them in 0W30 oil, which is the oil for this particular fork. I didn't have a replacement for the rubber seal at the top of the fork legs, so I had to make sure I could clean it properly, and it was filthy. Rockshox recommend putting a dowel inside the fork legs, but I didn't fancy scratching the inside, so I improvised, filled it with isopropyl, closed the hole at the bottom, and shook it like a cocktail. Remember, dispose of used alcohol responsibly. I made a long tube out of kitchen roll and pushed that down into the shock legs, twisting it round and slowly pulling it out, and that seemed to dry out and clean the inside of the legs. Next step was to get the wiper seals back into the shock legs, and this was surprisingly difficult. I don't know if soaking the foam in alcohol and then oil caused it to expand, but it seemed bigger than the groove it was meant to fit into, and it took quite a lot of careful massaging to get it to go back into place. Eventually I got the wiper seals back into their groove, and then I had to fit the lower legs to the upper legs, and this was another tricky job. I didn't want to risk damaging the rubber seals or moving the foam wipers around or scratching any of the metal components, so I took my time and eventually the legs went together. The next step was to put 10 mils of the oil into each of the lower legs. I used my brake bleed syringe for this, and I was careful to clean it and rinse it with oil before this. I tightened on the nuts at the bottom of the legs, and these went on much easier than they came off. I pumped the fork back up to the same pressure it had before, tightened on the air valve cover, and then realized I'd left off the sag indicator off, for the fuck's sake. So how do you test drive your newly refurbished front suspension during a COVID-19 pandemic? By riding it in slow motion through a sprinkler in your back garden in the sunshine. Stay safe, everyone.